I have no idea what the company did. I thought they just kept stuff in file cabinets and retrieved it for people. One of my personal ethics is do the thing well, right? Because it deserves to be done well for its own sake.
But sometimes you can forget, okay, let's go to this target, but the operational side of things is still important.
That was my first reaction was, no, absolutely not. You throw a rock and you'll hit somebody who claims to practice real estate. We get paid to think outside the box.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that works with professional services firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Patrick Corbett, the president and CEO of Vanguard Research and Title Services Incorporated, a full-service boutique title insurance agency in Upstate New York, providing expert title research and title insurance solutions across New York State for over 20 years. Patrick has over a decade of experience in the real estate title and settlement industry, working in nearly every facet of the business. But as he likes to say, no first grader dreams of being a title agent, and his story is no exception. With an academic background in English and outdoor education, Patrick has worked as a freelance copywriter and failed nascent operations consultant before stumbling into real estate settlement. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Saeed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to this one. For those of the viewers and listeners who may not know who Patrick Corbett is, are you able to share a little bit more about your background and how you arrived at being the president and CEO of the company?
Absolutely. A lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, as is often the case. My formal academic training is in English, literary criticism specifically. I wanted to teach in the academy. So my original goal coming out of college was to get my PhD and get set up in a nice university somewhere and do my research in a nice little cubby hole. Have people leave me alone. That was not the case. I also enjoy the outdoors and adventuring and fell into outdoor education. At the time when I graduated with a humanities degree, everybody was graduating with humanities degrees in a crowded field. I thought, well, what else is there? And outdoor education seemed to be an interesting combination of those two passions. Through a series of personal events and circumstances, I ended up needing to just get a job to make ends meet and stay local. And the rest is history. I fell in with the former owner's brother who ran some of the operations side and sales marketing, and we knew each other outside of the business, and he hit me up downtown Syracuse, New York. And one day I was having lunch and he said, hey, submit your resume. We're looking for somebody like you. And I said, great. I have no idea what the company did. I thought they just kept stuff in file cabinets and retrieved it for people, but here I am.
Amazing. I think for all of those out there who might not know what exactly title insurance is and what Vanguard actually research and title services actually does, can you explain to us what title insurance actually is and why does it benefit an individual purchaser, bank or investor of real estate compared to, for example, an attorney's expert opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. We always advocate for attorney representation. It's every individual's right to be represented when it comes to legal matters. They have their own independent representation to help them understand the rights involved, especially when it comes to contract law. And that's really what an insurance policy is. It's a contract between the insurance company and the individual. And the insurance policies, when it comes to title, you don't pick up land. Nobody hands you a bucket of land. Right? Says, okay, this is my land. This is what I'm getting, right? And everybody looks at the thing that's on the land, the house, the building, the structure, right? They're looking in terms of use. What can I do with that land? How, picture yourself living in that house or working in that space. But that's not what you're acquiring. Yes, in one sense, you are taking possession of those things built on the land, but the primary thing you're acquiring is the legal title. So it's how the law defines your ability to possess and occupy the land. And it's a complex issue, and it takes a lot of time to understand the specific title to an individual parcel of land. It has to be geographically located. You have to understand the history behind it. Because everything in New York, particularly, the legal theory is that everything that happened since the beginning beginning of time with respect to that land could impact your ownership today. And so it's a very time-intensive activity. Title insurance is a better form of title assurance than just looking at an abstract of the property's history and somebody giving you an opinion of, yes, this is good, this is not, this is a problem, that's not. Because the insurance policy does those things. But furthermore, it will indemnify you to the full value of the property at the time you purchase it. So if there's a loss, diminishing your value up to the total value of what you put into it, you'll get that back out of the policy. And the insurance company has a duty to defend you in court. Right? So you're not on your own trying to sort out the legal issues, right? Should a claim arise after the fact.
Wow, that's quite an interesting approach in the sense that you're not in it alone. There's an additional layer of security, I guess. So in terms of then a bit about your journey, so you were in New York, you handed in that resume. A few years later, now you're CEO and president of the firm. Talk to us about that journey from starting to where you are now and your rise to ownership and CEO and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. As a 23 or 24-year-old newly married person, I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship or maybe one day I'll own something or start something great, right? I think everybody has a little bit of that, right? Everybody wants to be the next Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, right? Everybody's got that little bit of, hey, I'm going to make my first million before I'm 30 kind of attitude. But it was mostly, a family to support. I need something to do. And so beginning that journey of this is the thing that's in front of me, committing to do the thing with excellence. I think that's something that's important to me personally. One of my personal ethics is do the thing well, right? Because it deserves to be done well for its own sake. And so working, that's something that as a young person, when older people are giving advice to younger people, it's okay, if you really want to show your expertise, you want to be well known for something, you're going to have to hunker down and work hard for like 20 years. Right. And before you make your break, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody says, you want the training montage is like 2 seconds long. And then we want to get to the point where we're happy and successful and famous. And so I think I somehow managed to absorb a little bit of that and say, okay, today, what can I do today to learn this business? What can I do today to sharpen my skill, do the best job I can today for the owner, for my coworkers, for the clients that I'm serving? And that was it. My focus was very much what is today? What can I do today? How do I survive today? Right. And so then years go by, there's a period of time where I actually left the business and came back. I thought there's a point that when you're working with a local company, there's the avenues for growth are not as clear, especially when you're a single family enterprise, right? It's okay, well, I'm here and this is what we do, but I don't see any pathway. There's no ladder to the top. I'm not sure how to expand my skill set. How do I find the thing, right? This particular task that I'm hired for is okay. I'm doing well at it. I really hate it. Well, I really like this other thing, but there's no room for it in the current operational model. So I hit that point, whereas, I wasn't sure, is this going to be a long-term viable career? Is it with growth opportunities? I went a different direction, moved completely across the country from New York out to Washington, state of Washington. In the process, it was a company that focused on wilderness medicine, so risk teaching outdoor educators and those responsible for managing outdoor groups in risk management and first responder courses. And so it wasn't instructional, it was operational, right? Somebody was looking to grow their operation as one guy operation. And so how do I, it's unwieldy enough now where I need to take it to the next step. And of course, here I come and say, hey, I've got just enough experience, right, to give you my 2 cents worth on how to do this. And in the process, I ended up having to incorporate myself. So it was the first time ever that I had the experience of being an independent contractor and having to, it was a really odd situation because that was a very focused relationship, but it wasn't the only thing I could do to support myself and my family at that point. So I had to conceive of this way of becoming this consultant persona to justify doing that thing, but also supporting myself. So it was an odd kind of mix. That's how I kind of fell into this sort of operational consultancy, copywriting, sort of matrix where I try to develop some relationships, cultivate relationships, say, okay, where is is the operational need in this business? Are they struggling to streamline a particular set of functions, processes, right? Are they trying to make product delivery better? Is that their problem? Is it marketing as a connection to the audience or their demographic? Is that the problem? So looking at how do I develop a broad range of skill sets to help these small market business owners solidify where they're at, but also look at how do I get to my next goal. And I did that for probably 1.5 to 2 years, and then just hit a point again where it's like it kind of lapsed into more of the copywriting side, which I don't hate. Power to the people that do the copywriting. And so again, there's just this weird nexus of opportunity. We said, okay, my wife and I were charting a direction for our family back to the East Coast, and it was wide open. We have no real firm plans, and some events changed in Vanguard, the former company. I called up the owner and said, hey, I'm really sorry about this thing that happened. I'm available. If you need somebody to fill in, I got some time. I can come up and do whatever you need to do. Not looking for anything other than just offering. Say, hey, I've got some time. I know it's tough. I'm willing to help. And he came back and said, well, I need someone full-time to do this title examining function. So I said, okay, well, what else have I got to lose, right? Nothing else is going on, so why not? And that was it. Even in that transition, coming back, the goal for me wasn't, maybe one day there's this pathway to take over. That wasn't. It was, again, just, okay, this next opportunity was in front of me. I just came out of this 2.5, 3 years of just, what was that? What was I doing? I had a regrouping for myself. And so it was just kind of, all right, let's just focus on something steady for right now and see what happens. And again, is putting that focus on just doing the job. Do the job well, learn the job well, right? What do you need? And it was a little different coming back into the industry. The industry evolves. I think people in the local industry tend to have the attitude of, well, this is just how we do it, right? We've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. Not much is different, but regulations evolve. Technology evolves. Expectations of consumer evolve. So the business is always changing. And for me, coming back into now that I've had that experience and I've worked in other things, I've seen other operational models, I've worked with a lot of different people, then coming back into this very specific, very esoteric business, I had a different perspective. So I started working and kind of relearning the job in many ways and then learning some new skills. I had a different perspective on how things were working and what wasn't working, what I had to do personally to feel like I could be successful in the job. So we're figuring out where is the support, where is it not, where does it not exist for the individual team member and how to navigate that. And after 2 or 3 years of being back, the owner approached and said, hey, I'm looking at getting out. I've been to discussions with this other company and they need somebody on the ground who understands the local business, right? Because even in our business, county by county, region by region, there are enough local customs and practices that are different to make it difficult to just expand into different markets through merger and acquisition activity, right? I can't just take over a company in another region and say, oh, well, I know how to do that there. Well, yeah, it's somewhat an apples to apples business, but there are enough regional differences where you really have to pay attention to what the customer is expecting, how things get delivered, products get delivered in that region. And so they were looking for someone who could quietly be a point of contact in the transition period. And a few months went by and didn't hear anything. Like, all right, so things were languishing a little bit. Well, here I am again. I come back to, okay, well, let's get things moving, right? Like, let's get business done today. Like, I get whatever you want to do. I'm all in. That's fantastic. Just give me a little bit of authority and power today to just take care of business today, right? And which ultimately ended up in the conversation of, how about you take over? And I was not prepared for that at all. That was not in the cards. That was not, absolutely not. That was my first reaction was, no, absolutely not. There's no way. But we were able to come to an agreement, and that was the rest is history. Because I recognized, I could see where his vision, that was one of the things that attracted me before, was I could see his vision for what the company could do, for what technology could do, what things could be. And I felt that there was a lot of unrealized potential. So that if that potential could be realized, if we could take action on that, the sky is the limit. We could take the world by storm. And I still feel that. I still believe that. Maybe a little less some days. But I saw that. I saw that potential. And I think that as an entrepreneur, you have to come to that point. When you're making the decision, do I take this risk? Is the potential that I see the reward of that, right, far greater than the potential negative impact in choosing that risk? And for me personally, I saw enough and said, well, it's going to be really hard, but if I can make it through, it'll be fantastic.
I think you said some really interesting points there. And firstly, anything worth doing is worth doing well, right? So as you said, my own dad, he raised me by saying, if you're going to do something, do it properly. Right, and it's a simple phrase, but it's something that as you get older and wiser, you realize that taking pride in what you do and learning skills over time actually pays dividends. But what you just mentioned there in the risk mitigation side of things, it has to be anything worth doing worthwhile. Anything that is worthwhile typically takes more risk and is the road less traveled. But by taking that risk, you open yourself up for an opportunity of something really great if you are willing to put your head down, get to work, and figure out problems that you haven't necessarily attacked before, right? Because that's essentially what business is in any given state, right? If there's a business similar to yours that has surpassed a certain size, certain demographics, certain geography, that means it's possible. And so if it's possible, that means that they've solved problems that you are currently experiencing that you haven't yet solved. So just by knowing that it's possible, it's just a case of, okay, then the problem is possible. What do I need to do to solve the problem to be able to get to that next phase? So I think it's really interesting, some of those points you mentioned along your journey, especially now in ownership as a CEO of the organization, from starting your career at 23 years old and getting to this point. There's a real interesting journey that is involved in making sure that you're consistent in however you approach what you need to approach to be able to find an element of success. And coming to the table, never expecting to be told, do you want to run the business? But I think you mentioned a really interesting point just then as well, is the fact that you turned and saw the vision, but you also said, give me what I need to run the business today. Give me some authority to find success today. Because I think that's often sometimes the missing piece in a lot of business trajectory growth, in the sense that there's a lot of vision element in entrepreneurship. There's always, you have to have a target to go towards. But sometimes you can forget, okay, let's go to this target. But the operational side of things is still important. You need the operational side of things to be able to actually run the business and get to a place where you're striving for. So there's so many elements and facets that are required within an organization to make things tick and make things work. But just from what you've said there, you've touched on so many different points. So I think that's really interesting. I want to talk a little bit more on the title insurance side of things now. Is there real value in title insurance given the high costs of an average real estate settlement transaction? Obviously, they can be quite high. There's lots of different taxes involved, so many different elements involved. Is it just another cost for an individual or whoever's purchasing to go, oh, do I need to think about this? Or is there real value involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We like to say real estate is local. To a large extent, it is. You can look at national trends, but at the end of the day, oftentimes real estate, especially title work, is very local. It's on the ground. And so having somebody there understanding how the property development has occurred in that region, especially in the record keeping, right, in the local registrar's offices, how deeds and more instruments get recorded, how people transact business over the last 100 years, impacts how business can get done today. But generally speaking, title insurance premium, so that the cost of a policy is typically 1% or less of the total settlement cost on an average residential transaction. So if you look at it this way, you're paying many different fees. I think to the average home buyer, first time, especially, right, they're buying a property for the first time, and you are presented with dozens of documents, hundreds of pages at a closing table sometimes, and asked to sign, right? And it's a blur, right? It's 40 minutes of, I don't know what just happened. They're just throwing pages in front of you. This is what this does. This is what this means. Sign it here, initial here, sign it here, move on to the next thing. You don't have time to process these things, right? Even though you often get closures ahead of time, but there's so many things. You look down the line item, this cost for this, there's an appraisal, there's origination fee for the bank, there's this fee and that fee, I don't know what that means, government fees, I don't even know what half this stuff is. And it's easy, right, to say, why am I paying all of this? And at the end of the day, when you look at the total settlement costs, you're paying a lot of money, or what can feel like a lot of money, for short term. The goal of a closing is to get you into a property, right, is to settle the transaction, right? I own this thing now. I can move in and move on with my life. And so you're not that individual participants are not delivering expert value, but the end goal is the very short-term consummation of that transaction, right? Let's just get to the closing table, get it done, move on to the next one. And title insurance comes with all those things that we mentioned earlier, right? Financial indemnity, duty to defend should a claim arise, but it's a forever protection. So an owner's policy protects you, and it protects your heirs and their heirs' heirs and their heirs' heirs, should you all, continuously own that particular property. And so for that value, one-time premium for forever coverage, so that value is, okay, it's not a short-term, okay, I've done just enough of what I need to do to get you to the closing table today, right? It's, yes, we've gotten you to the closing table, but we're also continuously protecting you for as long as you own that property. So that's where the difference in value is. Yes, there's a question of liability, right? If something went wrong after the fact, who has liability? Where do I go back to? Who's going to defend me? Who's going to protect me? Who's going to bear the cost of this liability besides me? So that's where the real value, in my opinion, that title insurance has.
I think that speaks a lot. It speaks volumes of the impact that title insurance can have, in the fact that obviously I wasn't 100% aware of that it would be coverage over from you to your going all the way down to the lineage, through the lineage until that property, I guess, is sold and the new owner is coming in. So no matter what happens, you've got that peace of mind that you don't have to really be worrying about anything that goes on after the fact. Also, going back to your original point earlier where you said that you have protection, and that means that you have someone on your side along the way, along the journey, that will help you with the protection when it's with attorneys or whatever it might be. So again, additional protection. And I guess it goes back to that risk mitigation aspect. And in all areas of life, risk mitigation is always a sensible way to approach things. And for 1%, it's always worth looking at how you look at the value equation. What is the cost? Does it outweigh the value? If the value is well and above what the cost would be, then surely you go with what's value for money, right? So I think it's a really interesting point you mentioned there. What value does a para-professional firm like Vanguard provide an individual or corporate investor that a real estate attorney firm can't actually provide themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Difference is sometimes semantic or difficult to discern, right? Because a expert, diligent attorney or attorney firm that specializes in real estate, I think that's the key. A lot of attorneys, sometimes they cobble together practice, right? You throw a rock and you'll hit somebody who claims to practice real estate. But the differences are apparent when you have someone who doesn't regularly practice that kind of law. It's like going to a general practitioner for a very weird specialist medical need, right? They might get a couple things right, but they're missing a whole lot because they don't specialize in that particular area. And likewise, so a firm like us, we're not attorneys, right? We don't, although we have some on staff, but generally, we're not attorney firms. And so there is a prohibition, right? We have to be very careful that we're not professing legal advice. We're not claiming to be practicing any kind of law as such. But we have a unique position in the transaction because we do so many. The average real estate attorney locally, does a few hundred transactions a year maybe, or a few dozen, right? Depending on how big their practice is. They've got maybe one paralegal or one part-time paralegal. So just through the operation they maintain, they just can't do a lot. Whereas a company like us, we're focused on volume of transaction and diversity of transaction, right? So we have to be expert at a broad swath of title and real estate law. And we structure, right, our capability, both in our ability to produce a particular type of product, but also to deliver service to various different parties in a transaction. We focus our time and energy in making the operation function across 10,000 transactions a year. and delivering that same expertise, that same level of care and diligence with every one of those transactions. And granted that our role in each one might be very small, right? We might be delivering just one very particular kind of product to one particular kind of entity or servicer and we might not ever see the result of why they're asking for that particular products. But again, that high volume we're very experienced, right? We see a lot. We understand claims avoidance. We understand through the nature of claims practice. Our title insurance is $1 billion industry, and they pay tens of millions of dollars in claims every year. So they understand what can happen. It's the idea and so through that experience, we understand how to work through different aspects of a transaction. And I think we can relate to a customer and individual in a different way, right? Because we get paid to think outside the box, right? Legal law is inherently sometimes antagonistic, right? It's, I hire my attorney to protect my rights. Their job is not to protect the rights of somebody else or figure out, right? So you have these parties, especially when it comes to civil law and criminal law, it's inherently you've got two sides. Everybody's trying to protect their own interests and protect their own side, right? Which is good. I mean, you want that to a certain extent. But a real estate transaction needs to be necessarily collaborative. And a traditional legal mindset is not always conducive to collaborating with multiple disinterested parties around getting the thing done, right? And so that's where we come in, right? That's our niche, is to grease the wheels and make it all happen, right? To get yelled at, we take the flack for everybody, right? So yep. We think outside the box and find the solution to get the thing done. But to get it done right, that's the key, is our expertise is always for the end consumer. But we understand that we have to sometimes work through the relationship of the attorney representative, of the lender partner, right? All of those parties in the transaction have different needs. The lender has very unique underwriting requirements and demands. There are many complex regulations affecting financial institutions that they have to comply with, right? It's a really big, grossly complex machine, right? Not all the parts work right together to get your individual transaction done, the way you want it to. But that's our job, right? Your attorney's representative, their job is to represent you well. That's what you're paying them to do. You pay us to make everything work, right? To understand how to get everything come together, right? To get that deal done.
I love that. And I'd never heard of it in that way, in the sense that when you talk about attorneys, and they are essentially there to defend your rights, and so you have polar opposite views, polar opposite arguments and things like that, and typically attorneys and that there's less collaboration when it comes to that, because you are quite simply fighting ideas. And having someone come in and have a collaborative approach by being able to drive the end consumer as the priority, and as you said, grease the wheels of the whole process, can really provide value in the whole process itself and ensure that things actually do happen the way it should happen. So I think there's some really interesting points you mentioned there. In this section of the podcast, we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room, and that's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate in their business. So, as the first question I'd like to typically ask at this stage of the interview and podcast is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
Yeah, well, that's a loaded question, Saeed. Not sure if I want to let you into the kitchen too much there. It's challenging, right? I mean, you're looking at companies that exist in that kind of 1 to 5 million annual revenue spot. They don't have, maybe they've got a dozen employees, a couple dozen employees. Sometimes it's difficult day to day to figure out, how do I exist only as a leader today, or how deep into the operation do I need to go at any given time, right, to carry the day, get business done. Because I could spend a week just in the operation producing things, right, kind of on the line, so to speak, just cranking out the widgets. Which you do too much of that, it's not conducive to growth and strategic development and all the things the business needs to thrive and grow and move forward. So I think it's a balancing act. Cal Newport has a seminal book, Deep Work, and I think reflecting on that sort of mono-focused mentality, instead of in our society, I think we're trained to, there's this just crazy frenetic activity. There's so much content that's being pushed to us. There's so much demand. And our culture, I think that's just general expectation, is that we are always available in all the ways that people want us to be available to them. And this idea of, well, I have to multitask, right? I have to be able to, listen to a podcast and type this email response and, oh yeah, I got to pick up the phone too when it's going, and I got to shift between all of these different activities. And really, that sort of frenetic activity doesn't produce a good result at the end of the day. I'd say there's certainly some aspects of that are necessary to live in real life. I think for me, it's finding the challenge of restructuring my time, especially a lot of the business is reinvigorating and restructuring. So again, I hesitate to say reinventing, because I think that gives a wrong connotation. But working, I have to block out time. I'm finding that I have to be more intentional about, so, okay, this is my block of time where I'm going to engage in what Cal Newport terms deep work, right? I'm going to, intensely focused, no distraction, put my devices on work focus and silence, and just say, okay, this is what I need to accomplish this in this span of time, whatever it is. I've got to develop a wireframe for a new website, or I've got to write this section of this manual for our operation, or I have to work on this part of a white paper for this conference that's really important. And it's being able to delve in, take up, it's crazy because for me, the last couple of years, it's been when I show up, people want me. I can think for them. Right. It's okay. Oh, boss is here. Right. He can answer this question. Well, you probably could answer that yourself. Eventually you'd get there. But, so it's hard to get into this operating mindset of, okay, I'm needed everywhere. Right. I have to be there to move that forward, and they need me to do this and they need me to do that. And it's hard to step back. It's okay. No. I actually need to have these times and spaces where I'm not available so I can do some important work to push an initiative forward, or to drive certain aspect of a strategy forward, or to carry the operation. So I think that this, honestly, is just a struggle to finding balance between, all right, how involved do I get, right? Because there is value in showing up for your team, right? When you physically go there, right? I travel to our branches. I try to get to as many customer offices as I can to show up, just be present, be a face, understand their pain. And it is helpful at times. You're working in the minutiae of the business. You say, okay, wow, that really doesn't work well, right? That's really cumbersome, and I don't like how that flows and what they have to do. And sometimes you're not getting that feedback, right? Sometimes people are not that aware to say, hey, this doesn't feel like it's functioning efficiently. But when you get in there and you say, well, yeah, that doesn't work really well, so then you come back and you get the 30,000 foot view again. So okay, let's tweak that, right? And kind of smooth that out, and then okay, let's see how that goes. So it's just a constant tension, right, between, I think, how much do I go and how much do I step back.
I think you've summed it up, and I think that's a really big challenge that a lot of business owners have to try and find a balance on. And it reminds me of the saying of working in the business or working on the business, right? And it's finding that balance, because you can get lost in working in the business, and before you know it, working on the business falls in the back end. You're not looking at strategy, you're not looking at how you move the business forward, and you work too much in the weeds, in the minutiae of in the business. But then again, if you work too much on the business and not in the business, if you don't have the operations people to help you with in the business, you could be working on strategy, but the business is falling apart. So finding that kind of the perfect balance, challenge every business owner. I tell you right now, we've done so many podcasts now, and the amount of times I've heard that, it's you're not on your own. But that's the challenge of running a small business, right? Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for sharing your insights.